I've been through a lot in my 61 years on this earth. I buried my husband. I raised 2 kids on my own. I survived things that would have broken most people. But nothing prepared me for the moment my son-in-law looked me dead in the eyes, picked up a glass of whiskey, and hurled it straight at me because I said no. And what happened in the weeks after that dinner? That man's entire life fell apart, piece by piece, and I watched every single second of it.
Let me back up and tell you who I am, because you need to understand the full picture. My name is Carol. I live in a mid-sized town in Ohio, nothing fancy, nothing remarkable. I've got a small house with a garden I'm proud of, a golden retriever named Biscuit, and 2 kids who are the reason I kept going after my husband Robert passed away from a heart attack back in 2014. My son, Danny, lives across town with his wife and my 2 grandkids. He's steady, hardworking, calls me every Sunday without fail. Raised him right. Then there's my daughter, Melissa. Melissa is my sunshine. She always has been. Smart, beautiful, the kind of woman who walks into a room and somehow makes it warmer. She got her father's eyes and my stubbornness, which, looking back, is probably both a blessing and a curse. Melissa met Brandon about 5 years ago at some work event. He was a sales manager at a regional distribution company, drove a nice truck, had good teeth and a firm handshake. First time I met him, I thought, okay, he's charming. Maybe a little too charming. But Melissa was glowing, and who was I to dim that light? They got married 2 years later. Small wedding, backyard ceremony, and I cried like a fool the whole time. For the first year or so, things seemed fine. Brandon had his quirks. He liked to dominate every conversation, always had to be the smartest person in the room, made little comments here and there that sometimes rubbed people the wrong way. But I told myself, that's just how some men are. I didn't want to create problems where maybe there weren't any. But there was something that always sat uneasy with me about Brandon and drinking. He wasn't a falling down drunk. He didn't slur his words or stumble around. But when Brandon drank, the real Brandon came out. The one without the filter. The one who said things with a smile that weren't really jokes. The one whose eyes went just a little flat. I noticed it. I filed it away. And I kept my mouth shut, because Melissa seemed happy, and that mattered most to me. About 6 months before the dinner that changed everything, I started noticing changes in Melissa. She stopped calling as much. When she did call, she sounded tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. She lost weight she didn't need to lose. When I'd ask if everything was okay, she'd say, "Mom, I'm fine, stop worrying." But mothers know. We always know. I invited them over for Sunday dinner one evening in early October. Nothing special, just pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans from my garden. Danny and his family came too. It was supposed to be a nice, normal night. Brandon showed up already halfway through a mood. I could tell the moment he walked through my front door. He had that look, jaw tight, eyes restless, like the whole world owed him something and hadn't paid up yet. He hugged me, barely, and went straight to the kitchen asking if I had anything to drink. I had wine on the table, beer in the fridge. But Brandon saw the bottle of whiskey on the counter, a bottle Danny had brought as a gift, and his whole demeanor shifted. "That's what I'm talking about," he said, grinning like he'd found buried treasure. Dinner started okay. We talked, we laughed a little. The grandkids were running around being loud and wonderful. But I kept one eye on Brandon the whole time, the way you keep one eye on a storm cloud on the horizon. He poured himself a generous first glass of whiskey before we even sat down. Then another one before the food was halfway gone. Melissa was quiet beside him. Too quiet. She kept redirecting conversations, filling silences, laughing a little too quickly at things that weren't that funny. She was managing him. I recognized it then for what it was, and my stomach dropped. My daughter was managing her husband at my dinner table. Danny noticed too. I caught his eye across the table and saw the same concern I felt reflected right back at me. Then Brandon poured his third glass. Danny said casually, "Hey man, slow down, Save some for the rest of us. With a laugh, trying to keep it light. Brandon smiled. But it didn't reach his eyes. I think I'm alright, buddy. The temperature in the room dropped a few degrees. But we kept going. Dessert came out. The kids had pie. And for a moment I thought, okay, we're going to get through this night. I was wrong. Brandon slid his glass toward me across the table. Not toward the bottle. Toward me. Like I was the help. Carol, top me off. Not a question. Not a please. A command. The kind of tone that assumed I would just do it without thinking, the way you'd ask someone to pass the salt. I looked at him for a moment. Then I looked at Melissa. Her eyes were down on her plate. I said quietly, I think you've had enough for tonight, Brandon. Silence. Not the peaceful kind. The held-breath kind. He laughed. That short, dismissive laugh men like him use when they want to make you feel small. Excuse me? You've had 3 glasses, I said. The bottle stays where it is. Danny put his fork down. The grandkids had gone quiet, sensing something they were too young to name. Brandon stared at me. And I watched his face change. Whatever thin layer of social politeness he'd been wearing all evening just slipped. It's whiskey, Carol. Not rocket fuel. Pour the damn drink. Brandon, Alyssa whispered. Just his name. A warning wrapped in fear. He ignored her. I held his gaze and I said, No. That's when he picked up the glass. I thought for 1/2 second that he was going to pour it himself. But instead, he gripped it, and he threw it. Not at me, exactly. But close enough. It hit the wall beside me with a crack that made everyone at that table flinch. Whiskey and glass fragments rained down. Biscuit bolted from the room. My granddaughter started crying. The room was so still after that, I could hear the clock on the wall. Brandon pushed back his chair. You know what? You've never respected me. Not once. This whole family looks down on me and you all know it. And then he walked out. Just like that. Out my front door, into the night. Melissa was on her feet before the door even shut. She was looking at the wall. At the glass on my floor. At me. Mom! Are you okay? I asked her. Because that was the only thing I wanted to know. She didn't answer. She grabbed her purse and her kids and she left too. She had to go after him. I understood that. But understanding something and not being hurt by it are 2 very different things. Danny stayed. He helped me clean up without saying much. His wife put the grandkids to bed in the spare room so they didn't have to sit in all that weight. When it was just the 2 of us in the kitchen, Danny said, Mom, that's not the first time, is it? I didn't answer right away. I just wrung out the dish towel over the sink. I don't know, I said honestly. But I think it might be getting worse. That night I sat in my kitchen until 2 in the morning. Biscuit had his head in my lap. I kept replaying the sound of that glass hitting my wall. The look on my granddaughter's face. I want to be honest with you, part of me questioned myself. Did I provoke him? Should I have just poured the drink and kept the peace? That's the thing about people like Brandon. They make you doubt your own instincts. They make the reasonable, calm thing you did feel like the problem. But then I thought about Melissa's eyes staring at her plate. And I thought, no, I did the right thing. The question was, what happened now? Melissa called me 3 days later. She was crying before I even said hello. It came out slowly at first, then all at once. Brandon had been drinking heavily for over a year. What I had seen at dinner was not unusual. It was Tuesday. He'd said things to her. Done things. Nothing physical, she said, but the line between what he was doing and physical was getting thinner. She said, I didn't want you to know, Mom. I didn't want you to worry. I closed my eyes. Baby, that's not your job. Protecting me from the truth. That is not your job. I asked her what she wanted to do. She said, I think I already know. I just needed to say it out loud to someone. I drove to her house the next morning. I helped her make a plan. Not a rushed, chaotic plan, A real, solid one. She called a lawyer that week. She quietly began separating finances. She talked to her HR department about her options. She was methodical. Calm. She surprised me, honestly. And then she told Brandon she wanted a divorce. Now, I expected him to fight it. I expected him to rage and plead and manipulate. And for a little while, he did. He called Melissa 15 times in one day. He showed up at her office. He texted me, saying I had poisoned her against him, that I had destroyed his marriage over a glass of whiskey. I didn't respond. Not once. Because some people need an audience for their chaos, and I had decided I would not be one. Here's where I want to be careful, because I'm not someone who celebrates other people's suffering. I'm not built that way. But what happened to Brandon in the months that followed was not something I engineered. It was something he built all by himself, brick by brick, over years. I just happened to have a front row seat. First, his employer let him go. Turned out the behavior I saw at my dinner table was not being saved just for family occasions. There had been complaints. A confrontation with a colleague. An incident at a client meeting. When Melissa filed for divorce and things became more public, the company quietly pushed him out. Then the friends started dropping away. Because once the performance stops and the curtain comes down, people see clearly. And most people, when they see clearly, don't want to stay. His own brother, a man I'd only met twice, called Melissa to apologize. Said he'd watched Brandon become someone he didn't recognize and that he was sorry she had lived with it as long as she had. During the divorce proceedings, Brandon tried to paint Melissa as unstable, as a bad mother, as someone who had failed the marriage. The lawyer Melissa hired was sharp as a tack, and she was not impressed by any of it. The judge wasn't either. Melissa got the house. She got primary custody of the kids. She got a fair settlement. Brandon got a wake-up call he hadn't ordered and didn't know what to do with. Last I heard, he'd moved into an apartment 2 towns over. I don't wish him harm. I genuinely hope somewhere in whatever quiet he now has, he looks at himself honestly. But that's his work to do. Not mine. Not Melissa's. It's been almost a year now since that dinner. Melissa is different. Better different. She laughs differently, easier, from somewhere deeper. She brought the kids over last Sunday, and we made pancakes and the house was loud and messy and full, and at one point she caught my eye over the heads of her children, and just smiled at me. No words. Just that. And I thought, there she is. There's my daughter. She started therapy. She's sleeping again. She got a promotion at work 2 months ago. And she told me recently that for the first time in years, she wakes up in the morning and doesn't feel like she has to brace herself. You can't put a price on that. People have asked me, mostly friends who heard the story secondhand, Carol, do you feel bad that it all fell apart? And I tell them the same thing every time. A glass hitting a wall beside you sounds like an ending. But sometimes it's a beginning. Sometimes it's the moment the fog clears and you see exactly what has been living in your house and sitting at your table and eating your food. I refused to pour that man one more drink. And that small, quiet act of holding a line, that was the beginning of my daughter getting her life back. Here's what I learned. Silence is not always peace. And keeping the peace at any cost is sometimes just letting the wrong things grow in the dark. If you are sitting at a table somewhere, maybe not a dinner table, maybe a different kind of table, and someone is making you feel small for saying no, I want you to hear this. No is a complete sentence. It does not need an apology. It does not need an explanation. And the person who throws something at you for saying it has just told you everything you need to know. Don't pour the drink. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you've been through something like this, leave a comment below. You are not alone. I promise you that.